Hey dude! Yeah, you there, with the Tamagotchi and the Pogs and the radical backwards baseball cap. Do you like video games? Totally tubular. Allow me to change that. Many of us probably look back on gaming in the 90s with nostalgia-fueled rose-tinted glasses. And whilst, yes, there were some great games released in that decade, there were some downright crimes against the medium committed as well. For today's list, we've gone back in time. Figuratively, of course, we're good, but we're not that good. Taken a look at all the games released between 1990 and 1999, and scanned them with our patent-pending Video Game Quality Checker trademark, in order to find the most horrible, most unforgivable, and most stinky games of the flyest decade in history. This list isn't based on critical consensus, but rather our own opinions. So, if you don't agree, then just talk to the hand, cause the face don't wanna know. Just a bit of 90s slang for you there. I'm Ashton from Triple Jump, and here are the 10 worst games of the 1990s. Number 10, Night Trap, 1992. If you've heard of Night Trap before, it's likely due to the fact that it, alongside Mortal Kombat and Doom, was largely responsible for the foundation of the ESRB, the organisation responsible for assigning age ratings to video games in the USA, Canada and Mexico. What you might not know though, is despite all the controversy it courted, as games go, it's really not good. Night Trap tasks players with overseeing teenage girls at a sleepover which, unbeknownst to the teens themselves, is taking place in a house overrun with vampires. Players must watch surveillance footage and listen in on conversations in order to lay traps and prevent the girls from being hurt. Though the game is reminiscent of a B-movie, no, not that one, which is sort of fun if you're into that kind of thing, and the acting isn't as bad as it could have been, the gameplay is really rather dull and repetitive, boiling down to simply pressing one button at the right time in order to lay a trap. Put simply, if it hadn't been for all the scandal surrounding it, Night Trap probably would have been nothing more than a footnote in the history of gaming. Number 9, Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, 1993. We're sticking with FMV nonsense for the moment, but if you thought Night Trap was bad, just wait until you see Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, the romantic comedy dating sim and visual novel released for PC in 1993 and for the 3DO in 1994. Plumbers Don't Wear Ties focuses on the love woes of John and Jane, two folks whose loving parents are pestering them both to find a spouse, and it's up to players to ensure that they get together by the end of the game. To do this, they follow a choose-your-own-adventure format, picking from one of several options at important story junctions. Though advertised as a full-motion video game, Plumbers Don't Wear Ties only features any actual video right at the beginning, with the rest of the title basically being a PowerPoint presentation. The gameplay is also horrifically dull, the storyline makes very little sense, and the voice acting is some of the worst we've ever heard in a video game.
Who the hell are you?
I'm taking over this story.
So awful is Plumbers Don't Wear Ties that it's widely considered to be a major reason for the failure of the 3DO. Yeesh, when you kill an entire console, I don't think there's any denying your own abhorrence. Number 8, Bubsy 3D, 1996. Though video game mascots have been around since the early days of the medium, it's probably the 90s that can be considered the decade of the mascot. Unfortunately, not all of them were winners, and whilst we'll never forget the likes of Crash Bandicoot, Lara Croft and Sonic the Hedgehog, we very much wish we could erase Bubsy from our memories. Although Bubsy 3D isn't the last game in the Bubsy series, it did prove to be something of a temporary death knell for the franchise, as, following its release, the bothersome Bobcat lay dormant for over 2 decades. More the pity that he ever returned at all. In Bubsy 3D, the eponymous feline finds himself trapped on the planet Rayon, and must collect pieces of spaceship all whilst the Woolies try to stop him from doing so. There are a number of things wrong with Bubsy 3D, Bubsy's irritating voice being one and the litany of bland environments being another. But the biggest issue with the game is the fact that the platformer uses tank controls. Yuck! Not sure who in the development team thought that would be a good idea, but we recommend that they are punished by being stranded on a hostile alien planet. Number 7. Mortal Kombat Mythologies, Sub-Zero, 1997. By and large, the games in the Mortal Kombat series are very, very good. After all, what's more satisfying than nailing a few tricky combos then ripping your opponent's still beating heart from their chest? The exception to this rule are the Mortal Kombat titles that deviate from the traditional fighting formula and attempt to venture into other genres, as is the case for Mortal Kombat Mythologies Sub-Zero. This action-adventure travesty sees players taking control of Bi-Han, the original Sub-Zero, who embarks on a quest to retrieve Shinnok's amulet at the behest of Quan Chi. Throughout the game, players must traverse various levels, beating up baddies where they find them, and performing special moves like the ones found in the actual, proper Mortal Kombat games. Departing from the established Mortal Kombat formula was a risky move on Midway's part, and it was one that didn't pay off. The level design and camera work against each other, often putting players in scenarios where they can't succeed purely because they can't see what they're doing. The controls are awful, and the endless parade of copy-paste enemies soon gets boring. Best thing to do is put this one on ice. Number 6. The Crow, City of Angels, 1997. If you went through a goth phase in school, it's likely that, at one point or another, you saw The Crow, a 1994 movie about a murdered rock star who comes back from the dead to avenge himself and his fiancée. The film is generally considered to be rather good, but unfortunately the same cannot be said for any of its sequels, the reboot, nor the game that ties into the first follow-up. The Crow City of Angels loosely follows the plot of the film, which, incidentally, is really quite similar to the plot of the first movie. The completely unsubtly named Ash Corvin is resurrected after he and his son Danny are murdered by a gang, and he subsequently embarks on a quest for revenge and justice. Like the film on which it's based, the Crow City of Angels is a steaming pile of crap. The environments aren't bad and lend a suitably spooky atmosphere to proceedings, but everything else is a total miss. The controls are unresponsive, the fixed camera quickly becomes a pain in the arse, the lack of objectives makes the gameplay rather dull, and the collision detection is very hit and miss. Pun very, very much intended. All in all then, nothing to crow about. Got him. Number 5. Shaq Fu, 1994. When you think of martial arts, who springs to mind? Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, Jet Li perhaps? Wrong! Because obviously the correct answer to that question is 7'1" basketball player Shaquille O'Neal. Shaq Fu came about after EA had signed O'Neal to appear in one of their games, and supposedly devs were inspired to put him in a martial arts title after hearing about his interest in the subject. The game itself opens with Shaq heading to a charity basketball game. However, on the way there, he enters a dojo, is sent to another dimension, and must rescue a young boy from the clutches of an evil mummy. What on earth they were smoking at EA in the 90s, I have no idea. The bonkers premise isn't the only thing wrong with Shaq Fu. The sprites are tiny and often hard to see on screen, the controls are fiddly, with many moves proving tricky to pull off. Plus, the fighters' sayings are all horribly cliched. What's even more bizarre though, is the fact that, despite the original being Poo Poo Plops, a sequel was released in 2018. What's surprising is that one wasn't very good either. Who'd have thought it, eh? Number 4. Link the Faces of Evil, Zelda the Wand of Gamelon, and Zelda's Adventure, 1993 and 1996. What's this? A wildcard entry? Well, knock me over with a feather. In the nearly 4 decades since the first game was released, the Legend of Zelda series hasn't put a foot wrong. The missteps the franchise has had, though. Ooh, jinkies. Are they doozies? If you're a Legend of Zelda fan, you'll know the 3 crimes against the series committed by Philips and their CDI console are all equally egregious, and it's for that reason that we've decided to include all 3 on today's list. Link, the Faces of Evil, Zelda, the Wand of Gamelon, and Zelda's Adventure were released for the Philips CDI and are generally considered to be amongst the worst games of all time. And it's not hard to see why. truly horrible FMV cutscenes, live action ones in the case of Zelda's Adventure, horrendous voice acting, cruddy storylines, and simply appalling graphics all come together to make this trio of titles truly awful. So awful, in fact, that they're not even acknowledged in the Hyrule Historia, with series director I.G. Aonuma going on record to say that these don't fit in the Zelda franchise, which is basically the video game equivalent of "you can't sit with us." Number 3, Hotel Mario, 1994. You didn't think we were done with the Philips CDI abominations, did you? No, we couldn't possibly do a list on the worst games of the 90s and not talk about what Philips did to Mario. Someone should have been locked up, frankly. The premise of Hotel Mario is pretty standard fare for a Mario title. Princess Toadstool has been kidnapped by Bowser, who has turned the Mushroom Kingdom into his own private holiday resort, and it's down to Mario and Luigi to rescue her and thwart Bowser's nefarious plans. Sadly, beyond that, the whole thing falls apart. The core gameplay loop sees the Mario Brothers simply closing doors in various hotels, which isn't exactly the exciting endeavour the developers presumably thought it would be. The game also looks horrible, bearing the same Microsoft Paint-esque graphics as Link the Faces of Evil and Zelda the Wand of Gamelon, and the controls are generally unresponsive. Furthermore, Mario's voice is absolutely terrifying, with Charles Martinet's playful tones replaced with someone who sounds like a mobster who smokes 40 a day.
Dear pesky plumbers, the Koopalings and I have taken over the Mushroom Kingdom.
We don't know who this imposter is, but he's wearing Mario's skin, and to be honest, we're a little bit scared about what he might do next. Number 2, Postal, 1997. We've said it before and we'll say it again. The Postal series should just not. Postal, like Night Trap, is another game that wouldn't be anywhere near as memorable as it is if it hadn't been for all of the pearl clutching. It centres on a protagonist known only as Postal Dude, who goes around his hometown of Paradise, Arizona, killing people as he believes the US Air Force has unleashed a hate plague. The aim of the isometric shooter is simply to kill as many armed NPCs as possible, and once enough have been slaughtered, the exit to the level will be revealed. Sure, mowing down squishy digital people with reckless abandon can be fun for a bit if you need to let off a little steam, but after a while it gets mighty repetitive. Also, whilst Postal in and of itself might not be completely awful, though it is still rather plops, it did spawn an entire franchise in which every single entry is worse than the last. So for that crime alone, it has earned itself a spot on this list. Plus, it's just senseless violence, isn't it? Not to go clutching our own pearls, but at least give us a reason for all that bloodshed. Good gravy. And number 1, Superman, The New Superman Adventures, 1999. If you have even the smallest amount of knowledge of the games industry in the 90s, you'll know that there is one game that is generally considered to be worse than all the rest. And that game, dear viewer, is Superman, The New Superman Adventures, aka Superman 64. A game with more instances of the word Superman in its titles than actual decent ideas, Superman, The New Superman Adventures sees the titular pants-over-tights-wearing hunk attempting to save Jimmy Olsen, Lois Lane, and Professor Hamilton from the clutches of the evil Lex Luthor, who has trapped them in a virtual version of Metropolis. Although those in the game's target audience, i.e. kids between the ages of 6 and 11, thought the game was smashing at the time of its release, everyone with a fully developed brain saw the truth. The game is a careless, rushed mess of a title, designed only to milk cash out of one of the world's most beloved superheroes. The controls are shoddy, the camera's a pain in the bum, the enemy AI is wonky, it's full of bugs, and Jesus H. Christ, don't even get me started on the rings. Oh, and if you need further convincing of how little effort went into this game, its title was misspelled on the box. Brilliant.